Do you know what? I struggled with reading out loud when I was a child, especially in secondary school when I was asked to read out loud. I absolutely hated it. I just thought I was really bad at reading and writing and maybe understanding. In my first year of university, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and it was such a relief. Since then, I've become more confident with reading out loud and learning different ways of adjusting as a dyslexic person. I'm even a teacher, for goodness sake. I just see the world in a different way, and that's actually okay. Recently, I discovered a book called It Belongs to the World. It's a children's story book, essentially, about the discovery of insulin, which I know I would have absolutely loved as a child. Welcome to episode 6, season 5 of Diabetes Squad. Today's guest, we've got Lisa. She's a children's author from Illinois, celebrated for her engaging storytelling. This is her first non-fiction book, which just tells you about the discovery of insulin through the eyes of a young person. And the most important thing as well, it has fantastic illustrations by one of our own, Miss Diabetes. Enjoy. So, hello, Lisa. It's so lovely to meet you. I'm so grateful that you made the time for today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, I couldn't even just want to say, I couldn't even tell you the magnitude of this book, because the book that we are referring to for the wonderful world for the listeners is It Belongs to the World, which I'm going to let you introduce, so then I'll tell you why I think it is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. So It Belongs to the World is a biography of Frederick Banting, who discovered insulin in the 1920s along with his team. It's written by me and it's illustrated by Miss Diabetes, who is a type 1 diabetic herself. Her name is Janina Godden. She lives in New Zealand and goes by Miss Diabetes online, where she creates diabetes comics. And we worked on this book together. And it tells the story of Frederick's life, how he grew up on a Canadian farm, kind of lonely, and was trying to figure out his place in the world. And when he was in the army and he went to medical school, and then he had an idea about how to discover insulin, and the story unfolds from there and talks about his life, his discovery, and his selflessness in what he did with selling the patent for, spoiler alert, $1. Because he famously said, insulin does not belong to me. It belongs to the world.
Absolutely. What a fab intro. This book. So I'll be honest with you, I only came across this book via obviously the wonderful world of social media. And that is great because I'm all the way in London and, you're all the way in the States. So it's a fantastic way. But just reading it, I think even for myself, who's, in my late 30s, I learned so much myself. Was this book sort of targeted for a younger generation, or would you have thought it was for everybody?
So I wrote it for children. My son, I wrote it for children, but I'll say I'm finding that adults like yourself are enjoying it. So my son Ryan has type 1 diabetes. He was 7 years old when he was diagnosed, and he's 14 now. He's doing great. But as a writer, when we learned about diabetes, the thing I wanted to do was read about it and read books. And I wanted to teach his classmates about it, why he had Skittles in his pocket and why he couldn't share them and things like that. And I didn't find a lot of books aimed for kids. And as I started learning about Frederick and his work, I thought, this is a good story that I want kids with diabetes to know. I want their parents to know. And I want it to be a way for kids without type 1 diabetes to learn about the disease, build awareness, learn about the symptoms, learn about their friends. But I am hearing on social media from a lot of adults who have type 1 that they're finding it very interesting, and they're using it to connect with little ones in their lives to explain to them So I started making it for kids, and I'm finding that it's connecting with adults too, which has been just such a wonderful surprise.
I mean, I've read it to my nephews, and they're between the age of 5 and 1.5. So definitely the 5-year-old understands it. But the 5-year-old always used to see me do bizarre things. So I say bizarre, but when I used to have a flash monitor, like he used to see me sort of swipe my arm, and he knew that was something that I just do. Or before we eat, I would be on my phone, which like a phone, but to put my carbs in, that he would see. So it's sort of children pick up on things and they understand the association, but they don't understand, I would say, also the technicalities and maybe the discovery element. So for curious children, especially within the sort of engineering, science, curious world, this book really fits into that.
Yeah. It has a great STEM element. I'm actually going tomorrow for 2 days. I'm speaking at schools because the book was selected for an Illinois State reading list by the Illinois Library Association. The Illinois Reading Council. And I connected with our local bookstore, Anderson's Bookshops, and they said schools are really looking for nonfiction for kids books. And with the STEM element, I think it would be a great way to introduce kids to the science behind it, to the chemistry, to talk a little bit about technology in the back of the book of what has available today. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really good entry points to this story.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pick out some of my favorites. So just be aware. I have put a couple of post-it notes in because so from an illustrative point of view, from my background, I mean, I'll talk about, I have no idea, have you got Miss Diabetes involved? We'll talk about that later. However, it's just the like very sort of, I would say complex, but written in a very family friendly. I wouldn't even say child friendly. I'll say family friendly. But, whilst preparing, for example, within his classes, discovering things like the glucose element, but then it sort of just gives you a very simple way of saying, this is the pancreas, this is where it's made. And something as simple as that, because you can't visualize what glucose is, or it's hard for a child to see it. And actually seeing it and associating it with a part of your body, which kind of makes sense. It's somewhere down there. It is amazing. But this is my favorite page, which I'll pop online as well. It's the page where Frederick sort of wakes up from his sleep with this brilliant idea. And at that point, we don't know what it's called. It's just an idea. It's a thing. And it's this glowing beacon of hope, which is very smiley and very friendly. And it's coming across like, this is the thing. This is the thing that's going to keep people alive. And it's just beautiful because that's the sort of hope element in the book. Did you want it to be so significant?
Yes, I did. And as I was doing research, I found through the University of Toronto online library, they have a great digital collection of Frederick Banting's memorabilia, I'll call it.
Yeah.
But I have a picture of the actual note that he wrote to himself with the idea of how to start this experiment for discovering insulin that he wrote that day at 2 a.m. And so I was able, that just to me was the turning point. And from a story perspective, to me, that's like the inciting incident of the story. We kind of start getting to know our character, and then it's like, one day something special happens. And then the story unfolds from there. So I really wanted to make that a key element of the discovery process.
And it is, because it is this sort of very much this hope or this sort of idea, but this feeling, because even on that double page spread, it sort of gives you this element to the reader of feeling this sort of hope amongst the very bleakness of it all. Yes. Because, you don't shy away from mentioning that, people have been passing away from it, and it was seen as a death sentence, apologies. Yes. So, that's something that you haven't shone away for, which I think is also quite important to state. Was that something that you wanted to do?
It was. And as I was going through, it took me about 2 to 3 years to get the manuscript right to the place where it was final and ready to be published. And I work with other writers who are my critique partners. I went through 47 different revisions of this manuscript.
Wow.
There were so many different ways I could have told the story. And I didn't want to shy away from the fact that how pivotal this discovery was. And it was the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
And I have had the experience of reading the book to children who have type 1 diabetes at a camp last summer. And it kind of gave me the chills. And I was very uncomfortable reading it in front of them because it was the first time I had done that. I didn't know if they would be scared or, if the little 5-year-old had realized that that was the case. But I feel like it's nonfiction. It's factual. We want to tell the story. We want to provide the information. And then we want to give them, like you're talking about, that element of hope that I'm going to be okay. And also hope for maybe, is there a cure one day and things like that. So, it was definitely a delicate balance. And I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I wanted to be accurate, but not despondent about it.
Of course. And I also do agree with the idea of the audience that you're trying to encapsulate, being factual, but also being aware that they are still extremely young. And, the capacity for them to a certain degree isn't going to be as much as, a caregiver like yourself or an adult that has had it. But, for me, I think reading the book was, like I said, I learned so much, which I feel quite pathetic, knowing that I've had diabetes for 18 years and I didn't know all this information. But reading it, there's, the very sort of last line towards the end of the book talks about, the fact that the insulin does not belong to me, he said, it belongs to the world. And there's a gorgeous double-page spread of, the joy that it has brought and also the life that it has brought so many people. The double-page spread is extremely bright and it's joyful, despite the fact that some days don't feel so joyful.
That's right. You're right. Yeah.
But it has really encapsulated the idea that, as you mentioned, selling the patent for $1. And here we are in this now world where there are so many issues surrounding diabetes healthcare. Would you like to share your opinion upon that?
Yeah, when I was learning about diabetes and reading all the blogs and everything I could to get information, and when I read about what Frederick and his team did, and I was like, what? And then I started doing research on the cost of insulin. It can cost $300 for a month's supply of insulin in the U.S. Around the world, I know it's very different as well. We are very lucky that we're in the position where we have good health insurance. We can afford our equipment. We can afford our insulin. But I started learning that that's not the case for everybody, and that some people can't afford their insulin and have to ration it and take less than they should, which we know can lead to terrible side effects, terrible end results. And so Janina, when she wrote her note at the end of the book, we each wrote a personal note at the end of the book. She said she considers Frederick Banting to be the first insulin for all advocate. And we're still fighting that fight. And it's unfortunate that we're fighting the fight, but there's a lot of good work happening with organizations like Breakthrough T1D, formerly JDRF, that are trying to advocate to make sure everyone can get access to this medicine that is a biological part of their body that just happens to be missing.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to be monetized. It doesn't need to be capitalized on. And I'm hoping in the future we're going to see it be more readily accessible to everyone around the world.
Absolutely. And I do definitely agree with that point that was made about or shall I say, the poignant element of the book, which has made it crystal clear, even from the title to the end, that this is for all, and all meaning like everybody. It doesn't matter about income, demographic, et cetera, et cetera. It is supposed to be for everybody. And unfortunately, 100+ years after the discovery, it's still difficult for so many people in such a variety of communities, in fact, as well, we have issues in the UK about people trying to get onto technology. Yes, the insulin might be there, but that's in itself a struggle, or almost a hybrid loop, or whichever sensor is more appropriate, despite the fact there is more awareness of it. Is there enough for everybody to be given the opportunity because of, our system here with the National Health Service? But I know in the States, depending on, I've spoken to various people about income, job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it has sort of, hindered a few issues for families. But have you found that people have come to you knowing that you're the author of this book and just wanted to share their experience or their thanks, in the bizarrest places like the supermarket?
I haven't been interrupted at the supermarket yet, although I did. My dentist lives in my community, and her children go to my local elementary school.
Okay.
And so she was like, "Oh, my kids came home with a flyer for your school visit," and we sat and I'm in the dentist chair, and we're talking about my books and everything, which is so funny. But I really connected with people online on social media, and they're saying, "Thank you for spreading awareness. Thank you for putting this story out there. Thank you for teaching me something maybe I didn't know about the history of it." And I'm trying to just spread the word as much as I can about this story. And hopefully Frederick can be an inspiration that he wasn't doing things for himself. He was selfless. He was doing things in service to others. And I think we could use a lot more of that in this world today.
And with the theme of this season, it's all about motivation. So if you were going to pinpoint what actually gave you the motivation to write this story, what was the sort of turning point in your career to think, I'm going to start writing about this?
So I have a few books out now. I have about 6 books out now. They've all been fiction.
Yes.
And I wrote the first draft in December of 2019. And at that point, picture book biographies in the U.S. market were becoming very, very popular. It kind of was like a new thing that was happening, and they were everywhere. And I was like, I've been writing a lot of fiction. I like to challenge myself. I like to try to write different types of stories. And I was like, I think I'm going to try and write a biography just to stretch myself. And I was like, I thought about it over a few months, and I was like, who would be interesting? Who would I want to do a lot of research about, spend a lot of time with? And I was like, how can I connect this to diabetes? And so then it made obvious sense to me that if I started researching Frederick's life and learning about him and reading books, and because I knew what he did with the patent, but I didn't know how his life started, how his life ended. He was a painter, which was something I wasn't able to put in the book, which I was so sad I couldn't put that in.
I didn't even know that. I wasn't even aware of that. That's amazing.
There's tons of paintings of his, a lot of landscape paintings of Canadian countryside, little snowy houses and everything. Oh. It's gorgeous. He had a very robust life. And so I found it so interesting. And so it was kind of just a challenge I wanted to do. And then I got swept away in the information and his story and his life, and it just kind of rolled out from there.
And that is the story. And I'm aware that, you have written books previously, but just to find a challenge and a person is something that obviously with your connection, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the connection that you have with diabetes is through your children?
Yes. My son, Ryan.
So, yeah, please tell us about that if you're happy to.
Ryan was diagnosed the summer between first and second grade. He had all the classic symptoms that I now know are symptoms: frequent urination, extreme thirst, very tired, and weight loss. And we took him to the doctor, having done some research over a few days, kind of expecting that he would be diagnosed with diabetes. I didn't know there was a type 1 and a type 2. I didn't know it was an autoimmune disease. He had to go to the ER. His blood sugar was in the 400s. He wasn't in DKA. So we were lucky of when we caught it. But
yes.
He went to the hospital, and we spent, 3 days there learning about type 1 diabetes, practicing giving saline shots to an orange. And then
Yeah.
in the US, we have the Rufus teddy bear doll.
We know Rufus, yes.
That's right. So we practiced with Rufus and, kind of went on from there. And Ryan's just been an inspiration to me because he just took it in stride. And he's a sensitive kid. He's an emotional kid. And I thought this would upend his life. It upended my life because I'm worrying and getting nervous. And I know all the side effects, all the worries that he just didn't have in his head. And he was just like, this is what I have now. And this is what I have to do.
Oh.
Plus, I get to eat a lot of Skittles and gummy bears. So.
Oh, I've heard that many a times.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he's 14 now. He'll be starting high school next year. He's very independent. We've had a very good relationship with our school nurse in elementary and junior high. They've been following him on the Deskcom Follow apps, sending him text messages if he goes low and doesn't notice and needs to get a little bump of gummy bears or something. And he goes to high school next year, and there the nurses do not follow the type 1 diabetics to give them their independence. So this is going to be a big change. When I found out about it in 7th grade, the nurse told me that, and I was like, what are you talking? He's not going to be ready, but he's ready. 2 years later, I can see that he's ready.
Yeah, and I do feel like, especially when they are so young, it is pretty much hands-on. And I've heard from a lot of parents, the diagnosis is not just with your child, but it's with yourself as well. As a parent, it's you that's had the diagnosis. But actually, from a teacher's perspective, I've been teaching for 15 years in a secondary school, so a high school, and I've noticed that we do monitor our children, especially the medical team, but we also kind of leave them to their own devices because they are of that certain age. So unless they're going on a trip or an international trip, then a member of staff would have another phone which will have the Follow app on it so they can correlate. But actually, it is about the child just being aware that I think I'm going low. Do I have a hypo treatment? Oh, no. Let me go to medical. Let me go to Miss Vigama and I'll be able to get something from her. Yeah. But it is just a case of learning to juggle life and whilst being a teenager, but also not feeling like we're not there for you. It is such a difficult, from a teacher who has diabetes, trust me, it's very difficult for me not to micromanage.
Oh, gosh, I couldn't even imagine. Yeah.
I just want to look at the phones. I'm just like, tell me your readings. Tell me, how are you?
You're okay? Like, you're looking a little, yeah.
And it's also like, I don't teach you anymore, but I still want to know. And it's like, I have to learn to take that step back.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And it's hard for me it became very hard for me to not worry so much and not stress out so much. And it took me a few years to get to the point where I was like, I feel he's going to be okay and I'm going to be okay. And I can let go of the fear that really just enveloped me for many, many years about the worst case scenario. We've never had to use glucagon. We've never had any emergency situations when the only thing that got us in the hospital was when he had COVID. And he was vomiting and we weren't able to keep food in him. So we went to the hospital. They gave him some, that medicine that makes you stop being sick. I forget the name of it. He felt that. We got the insulin back in and going, and we were home later that night. So we've been very fortunate that he's been healthy, he's been responsible. And when he was very young, he was hypo-unaware, which was scary for me. And as he's gotten older, he can say, oh, I feel low. Look at I could, because he can look at his Apple Watch, check his number there. And so that's given me more peace of mind.
Of course. And because he's growing, into the world of being a teenager and taking more on board and being more responsible, he probably wants to feel like he wants to own it to a certain degree, That's another thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there's a sense of like pride of like, oh, mom used to have to do this for me. Dad used to have to do this for me. And I can do it myself now.
Yeah.
And he knows I'm a worrier, and he will come to me at times and say, Mom, I'm going to be okay. Like, don't worry. I'm fine. Stop freaking out.
And actually, that probably works magic on you because you are probably freaking out.
Yes, I've had my freakouts for sure. And I just have to like look at the data and look at the history and say he's been doing great. We don't have problems with him resisting insulin. There are times when he's like, oh, I wish I didn't have diabetes, or like, I don't want to do my pod change. Of course, there are all those type of things. But overall, in the broader picture, we've been very lucky, and I'm just so proud of how strong and independent he has become from this little skinny 7-year-old.
Well, I'll tell you something. He's probably extremely proud of yourself for what you've achieved. And, I trust me, I know a lot of teenagers, they hardly say it, but sometimes they, show that love. And I think like if from having somebody in their world that has looked after them for such a long time and having a book made, which doesn't necessarily talk about his journey necessarily, but it actually talks about the larger aspect of this world, of the wonderful world of diabetes. And I'm sure he's proud that you've produced something that is quite global now, I would say. And loads of people I've seen it on your social media. I mean, I know I shared it and I was just like totally inspired by it. But there's people across the world who are just so inspired by this book. But in terms of me being inspired at this grand age of my late 30s, how on earth did you collaborate with Miss Diabetes? Like, how did that all come together? Because she's worlds apart, like literally.
Yeah. So I have to say, I was very lucky. I had nothing to do with it.
Oh, yay.
I'll tell how the connection happened. So my editor at HarperCollins, who acquired the book, has type 1 diabetes herself. So when the book came across the submission pile, we actually sent it to a different editor, and they said, let me send it to Harriet. I think she would be a good fit, not saying why. And me and my agent are just like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And a few weeks later, she wrote back and she said, I love this manuscript. I'm a type 1 diabetic myself. I've been wanting to find a story about diabetes, and I know all about Frederick, and let's do this book together. And so that was very exciting. And then so they wanted to have someone who had type 1 diabetes illustrate the book, which was great angle and great like representation and things like that. So they went out and searched artists who were online, and Miss Diabetes has been doing comics for years, has a great following, is just well known. She's done things for the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
And they reached out to her. She'd never done a children's book. But they said, we love your art. And I think it was really smart because her art is vibrant and fun and accessible to kids. And so the color palette being bright.
Yes.
It could have been this dark, dreary story. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted it to be a story of hope. So when I found out that she was doing it, I just scoured her Instagram page and her website and watched all the stuff that she did. And so I was very, very lucky to have connected with her.
I just think her illustrations are so informative, but so bright, as you mentioned, and so joyful. And I know recently she's done a lot to do with women with type 1 diabetes and various parts of our lives, such as periods, pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, menopause, etc. And she's doing something on that, which I am just thinking, yes, we need to talk about that, please.
Definitely. Yeah. So she does, and she's an Insulin for All advocate. And she's, always been spreading the word about getting access to everybody. And it's just a very lucky and wonderful connection.
Yeah, I think you guys should do a sequel. What would you do for your sequel? What would you do next? I feel, who else is going to come into the wonderful world of this?
Yeah, maybe. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of like maybe from a patient perspective. I'm looking at my list of my stack of books that I have here that I've read. I don't know if you've heard of this one, Breakthrough. It's historical fiction, and it's the subtitle is Elizabeth Hughes, The Discovery of Insulin and the Making of a Medical Miracle. So she was a young girl who had type 1 diabetes before the 20s, before there was a cure. And she, at that time, you know, she was on a diet of like 400 calories a day. Like that was her survival mechanism. And she was the daughter of, it says, the daughter of America's most distinguished jurist and politician, Charles Evan Hughes. And he, of course, had connections in the world. And it's the story of like her life and how she was trying to survive. Oh, I'm getting the chills. To survive until there's a cure. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And she got insulin and, you know, she made it through. And anyways, it's a really good read.
I'm going to definitely check that out.
Harper and Arthur Ansberg are the authors.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. But that is important. It's the historical part. For someone like myself and many of our listeners, we only know, I would say not really know, but we're only now a little bit more aware of type 1 diabetes because of social media. That's really blown it up. I remember when I was diagnosed in 2007, I would say, honestly, hand on heart, I kept it quiet for about 10 years because I wasn't wearing any devices at that point. I was sort of pricking my finger and using a pen. So I could hide it really, really well until it got to a point where my medical team said to me, no, you need to start going on a glucose monitor. We're going to try to reduce it to a pump. And that's when I thought, oh gosh, I do need it. You can see it. And I think also being surrounded by the right people encouraged me to now be able to talk about it. You know, it's a lot to get to my point for myself.
Yeah.
But I do think there is something in hearing stories from people before the technology sort of became enormous and what it was really like, because it must have been like, well, in my opinion, absolutely awful, you know, almost life crippling.
Yeah, exactly. And one story I read, I'm going to give myself the chills again. When word got out about the insulin and people knew it was something that wasn't a cure but would help them survive, and they were trying to produce as much of it as possible, and it takes time, right? And people, there's a story of a mother who like came to Frederick's office, like carrying her very, very, very sick child, saying, can you get me the medicine? Can you help me? And I just can't imagine as a parent what it must have felt like to go through that and then to have that feeling of hope, but to be like, how do I need the medicine and I need it now.
The desperation.
The desperation. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we've come, you know, so far. And it has been really, really wonderful.
Absolutely. And there's this part, I just want to actually reference the book again, that, you know, something that you've literally just said just struck a memory in my opinion. I would say towards the sort of end-ish, there's a section where you see these almost traffic lights colours. And what I really enjoyed about the traffic light colours, so for example, there's one here of a young boy where the insulin didn't work. Yes. Leonard, and the insulin didn't work. So it's sort of a triangle which is red and it's a sad face. But then further down, when you go into the book, you can see, you know, that it's changing colour and because it's working. And there's something in that with the story that you just said about that mother feeling that very much like rock bottom, standstill. I'm helpless. Yes. You know, I need the help. And then feeling that glow and that sort of right green, we're ready to go, everything is okay, was something that I felt subliminally or not, I'm not sure. But that, you know, there's a scene where, or should I say, a double page spread where the children are playing and you can see above their heads all the little green
those signs. Yeah.
And I just thought, you know, for diabetics, right, we get that. Like we are like that. We see our day or our mood as I might be an amber right now, but I think it's going to come down to a green.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. And so, Janina, that's something, again, from the perspective of someone who has type 1 diabetes, to illustrate that that's a thing in her head that probably is not as much in the forefront of my head, you know? And so I thought
Yeah.
that was very interesting, a very subtle thing that kids, I think, would notice visually, even though it's not talked about explicitly in the text. It's just a like, oh, like you said, like a stoplight. Like, this isn't good. Oh, it's going to green. Okay, that's awesome. I know that
Yeah.
that's a positive sign. So, yeah, so that was really brilliant for her to do that.
It's funny because actually since I got the book, which was I think just before Christmas, and we got the book, and was reading it to myself because that's what I do. I read the children's books clearly, but no, I was reading it because I was intrigued, and I was showing it to my husband, and we were just having a look through it. And he's like, "You say stuff like that? You're like, yeah, I feel kind of good, so I'm agreeing." And he's like, you've said it, but I in his head. I think it's I didn't even realize I say it, but sometimes if I'm a little bit high, I'm like, oh, I just feel so like red and annoyed and angry, you know, almost like the character from Inside Out. Like I feel angry, like I'm angry. And he's just like, well, in the book, like they've got the symbols. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize. I was like, that's crazy. Our worlds are literally coming together.
Yeah, that is so neat. Oh my gosh, I love that story.
I don't know how many other diabetics feel that way, but I do constantly feel there's like a label attached or, you know, I'm sort of categorized myself. So, for example, right now I've had I would say, a late-ish lunch. So I'm probably in amber at the moment, you know, going into the hopefully, you know, the hybrid loop is working. So I'm coming down to the green. So it's interesting how the subliminal messages in the book are not to diabetics.
Right, exactly. You know, if you know, you know.
Exactly. And that's what I believe makes the book so accessible as well, because it doesn't matter about the age as to who's reading it or they're hearing it. They're able to actually connect with it on a far more deeper level. And if there is a child who's the only one that has it, maybe they feel like I'm actually not the only person. Like there's others.
Yes. Yeah. And especially like you were talking about that spread where like everybody's running around and outside and skipping and happy. And I think it shows them that they are not alone, that there are other, like you said, kids in the world with this. And if they haven't had that experience of like going to a diabetes camp or something like that, but they come across this book, hopefully it does make them feel seen and make them feel less alone.
Absolutely. And what is your hope with the sort of the future of, well, I would say obviously for your son, but also in terms of diabetes, you know, in terms of all the advancements that are happening on I would say even a constant basis, it seems like every month there's something new at the moment.
Yeah.
What is your hope?
My hope, of course, is that there's a cure. And I know I've heard people say, oh, they've been saying there'll be a cure in 15 years for, 75 years. But in the meantime, we have to live with it. We have to manage it. And so I just hope that everybody can get access to the insulin, access to the because it's not, you said, it's not just the insulin. It's the continuous glucose monitor. It's the insulin pen. It's the pump. It's
Absolutely
the glucose tabs. It's syringes. It's all this sorts of stuff that people need to survive. And so I just hope that we get to the place where it's not expensive. It doesn't have to be tied to your health insurance, that it can be something that is, I don't know, like a bottle of aspirin that you can get over the counter. Wouldn't that be lovely?
That would be ideal. That would be the dream, from friends of mine, including even sort of students who've still waiting to go on a hybrid loop, for example. It's almost, at least a minimum of a year to a year and a half that they've had to wait.
Wow.
And I remember, and I will never forget this, I remember the first time I went on a pump, which God knows was maybe 2018, a long time ago. It was the the Onupod even, Eros. So that's a bit vintage, the vintage one.
Yeah.
And I remember as soon as I got the training and I came home, I felt quite emotional that I had this thing. And I don't know, maybe it's just the gratitude of waiting so long and receiving it. But in my mind, I think for somebody that doesn't have access to insulin, like just the insulin itself, the gratitude is just enormous.
It is.
It's hard to believe in this world that there are people out there in various communities that don't have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. And it's just heartbreaking. And I want to say I don't understand why it's so hard, but I do, because politics and people being money hungry and power hungry and those type of things. It's unfortunate that exists. But I think that we just, have to continue to have hope. We have to continue to advocate. We have to continue to research and fundraise, talk about it, and build awareness, and not feel like we have to run away from it.
And take on board the words of, or should I say, the characteristic of Frederick, which was about having accessibility to all, and also have this idea of, having empathy, and being able to try the best you can in the capacity that you have to help others, and may it be through your career in terms of being an author and explaining to people who this gentleman was and what impact he's had, or through being an educator, or just a mum for yourself, helping others who may be diagnosed, or other families. What message would you like to say to other caregivers who may have a child or a loved one who has been diagnosed?
I know what an emotional toll it can take, what a physical toll it can take, sleepless nights, getting up to feed gummy bears in the middle of the night, or do a finger prick before we had the Dexcom, all those type of things. But I would say to remember how strong your child is, to remember that they're still the same person they were before. Their personality is there. Their fine sense of humor has not gone anywhere. So let it not be the whole part of their life. Let it be a part of their life, but not their whole identity. And when you're struggling with it, reach out to communities like Breakthrough T1D. We reach out to moms groups, camps, American Diabetes Association, and these are all US-based things. But there are people who know what you're going through, and you don't have to go through it alone. So, talk about it, and we're here to help. And maybe this book or any other book, is a way to kind of bridge that gap and be a conversation starter.
I couldn't agree more. I definitely could advocate by saying, coming out of your sort of internal bubble and letting others in has most certainly helped, myself, including my family, my husband, just getting to grips with all of it. And, charities, as you mentioned, like Breakthrough T1D, aka JDRF, I've done a few bits with them, but they have been fantastic globally to get those voices across. But even if it's something small, community based, or locally based through the school, etc., is such a great place just to sort of just speak to somebody and be like, yep, I'm tired, I'm burnt out, it's tough, and you're constantly worried, and just to unpack that can make a world of a difference.
It definitely can. Yeah. To just have someone sit and listen and go, I get it, and nod along with you and say, yes, I've been there. Even if they don't have to have the answers, just being a listening ear. And like you said, letting them unpack what's going on in their head and in their heart, it just can do so much.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to sort of shout about or promote whilst you're on today?
The only other thing I would add is that I have a classroom curriculum guide that accompanies this book on my website, lisakatzenberger.com. And it's aligned to U.S. New York State school standards, but I think anyone could use it. And it's a way to learn more in the classroom for any educators out there for young kids. So that's a resource that I have freely on my website. So maybe check that out too.
I am definitely going to check that out. And I was sending those resources to the right people. Don't you worry, especially amongst our educational trusts that we have. I will be right on that. Don't you worry. I'm that member of staff who always talks about diabetes, even in morning briefings. I would say, this week is Diabetes Awareness Week. This week is Insulin Awareness Week. And this is what it is. I just bombard everybody with emails about it. We need that. We need that awareness.
Yes.
But I do appreciate the learning resources that you've accompanied with the book, because the book is a fantastic learning resource, but there are so many ways of incorporating new literature into the curriculum, and actually having the resources already there makes it so much easier for teachers, because we have 1,000 things to do.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And a teacher who I am friends with created the curriculum to align it to standards and everything like that. So I think it's a really great resource.
Fantastic. Well, what I'll say is thank you so, so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Lisa, for creating this amazing book and presenting the discovery of insulin in such an engaging and clear way, not just for kids, also for adults. Frederick Banting's research has been incredible and most definitely has impacted my life since 2007. This little bit of liquid is genuinely a miracle. Knowing that children can learn about this fantastic liquid literally is priceless for me. I am a true believer that insulin is for all, and it should be for all. This podcast is written and presented by me, Manisha Rugama. The producer is Matt Wareham, and it's a Depictor production for Diabetes Squad.